While it's living in a coal mine, took time to call your ma, hey ma, hey ma.
This is Bon Iver's best song in years. It's not hard because there hasn't exactly been a lot of Bon Iver music in the 2010s despite indie ubiquity, and a lot of it hasn't been good, but this is something special. Most because there's some sense of self-awareness and realization of the passage of time, which draws some urgency. More importantly, if there's a call to snapping Justin Vernon out of a lot of petulant waffling, it's this. You want to drive change, you want inspiration, you want to break your hypocrisy against the dreamy swells of guitars, the sparse glassy clinks, but real organic foundation in the strings and horns that pull off a real crescendo to say something real? Well, yeah, that's the way to do it. And he delivered it. Hell, even the goddamn Grammys acknowledged this was a fantastic song. And you know what, for once, I wholeheartedly agree.
Picture hanging on the wall, picture hanging on the wall, picture hanging on the wall, picture hanging on the wall.
I love this cut for a lot of the same reasons I love Good Morning Sunshine from Little Brother, but Homeboy Sandman is a little less directly aspirational and more blunt and candid in describing his relationship in frankly amazing detail. And what I love about the song is how lived in it feels. There's a sense of reality to every single line, and the playful banter that follows the hook shows an ease of communication that underscores the framing of the entire album. Coupled with those sampled whooping sounds, a great bass line, and a soulful flair that could feel a little bit broadly sketch, except Homeboy Sandman's honest but relatively low-key delivery grounds this song with a lot of real sincerity and, dare I even say, a bit of romance. I mean, a song that can conversationally reference anal sex like this, that's gotta be some love.
Was it the dress I wore? Was it the wine he poured?
Well, this is a tonal shift. And look, anyone who knows indie country has already heard and praised this song time and time again this year, and there are some calling this the best country song of 2019, period. But again, it's not an easy song. Emily Scott Robinson sings from the perspective of a victim of date rape, looking at the outfit she wore that night that she thought she threw away, and is now questioning everything she did with the heartbreaking feeling that on some level it's her fault. And it's not, and deep down she knows that too, but when you have a society that repeats every single question and moment of self-doubt she has now, it makes her quivering voice and all the more pain-racked and heartbreaking the song becomes. It's the sort of track that pulls no punches and won't ask for empathy. The narrator herself doesn't think she deserves it, but against a spare acoustic backdrop and an uncomfortably intimate focus on all that detail, it draws it forth all the same. An utterly devastating track, but while we're in this territory...
On the windshield, it's one particular raindrop caught struggling in the incandescence. Took my hands off the wheel and cut the engine.
I can make the argument this is Billy Woods' best song. And yes, there's a lot of critics who have made that point already, to the point where longtime Billy Woods fans can call it easy or conventional to pick, but it's a moment where Billy Woods' storytelling rips away any pretense at abstraction to just show how illusory any hint of control he might have really is. From personal appetites to broken prejudicial systems to his own angst within fractured artifice, all amidst the textured, crackling world that Woods paints it so deft. Now, Kenny Siegel's lo-fi bass balanced against the bare, muffled, but slippery tones, and Mother Mary's distant voice amidst the synth-laden switch-up. But what truly cuts about the song is that Billy Woods does not spare himself in the framing. He'll highlight those who attempt to deceive themselves into having more control or power or clout, but in the face of cold, hard truth, he finds himself as the kid with no money in the dingy arcade, fucking with a joystick and pretending he's really playing. That's not one of the most cutting lines in rap this year. I don't know what is.
I don't owe you. No, I don't owe you anything.
So Tegan and Sara could have had a couple songs make this list from their catchy as sin slice of retro 2000s pop rock released this year, but this is the song that hits the most strongly, both in terms of its melodic intricacy, from acoustic touches to the simmering bass groove to one monster of a synth-driven hook. And sure, outside of that, it's a pretty straightforward breakup song, But again, the devil's in the details. The frustrated angst in giving so much and finding no appreciation. And even if there's still real feelings, you gotta end it because the emotional labor, it's too much, it's unequal. And when Tegan and Sara delivered that with huge vocal harmonies to boot, yeah, given my ear, I need an anthemic and righteous cut just like this. Wow, this one snuck up on me. Another slice of dream country where we might just get one of the most tragic and painful moments of yearning romance I've heard all year. Because on the surface, it might seem kind of sweet. She's looking for that extra bit of liquid courage to really confess her feelings, make it all real and tangible. But there's a quiet desperation to how this song is hoping for affection that just gets me every time, mostly driven by the production and a lot of the melodies, which have that burnished, intimate warmth and the supple bass presence, but the tones are more melancholic and sad, which makes you wonder why she had to wait for that added bit of heady courage, leading to the subtext that contains volumes of potentially deeper pain that she's trying to numb. Again, this is a song that could play for romance, but reveals a deeper humanity within that kind of transcends it. For me this year, yeah.
Can't get out from under it. Never more to leave here, never more to leave here. My love is the killing kind.
Okay, let's bring the mood up a little bit with Marianas Trench delivering the sort of grand finale song from which they become well known, and it's one of their best. The huge walls of strings, the interweaving layers of melodic motifs from both Phantoms and Astoria, tying the two projects together in a moment of unexpected climax that's damn near unparalleled, and Josh Ramsay delivering the sort of vocal performance of his career to seal in that melancholic madness of this whole story, all that melodrama. It's a titan of a song that is pure Marianas Trench, damn the radio or any playlist. Hell, the only reason it's not higher here is, well, the emotive core of the song only really comes through if you've heard and you love Astoria, and anchoring so much of the climax on that familiarity is a shortcut I can't help but call out. But again, in the annals of modern pop rock, there are so few who can approach this sort of height, and that's special.
Rest easy, Madeline. I'm bringing down the pain across this flooded county line.
So this is not the Ian Noe song I expected to be this high on my list, mostly because it's absolutely a scuzzed out bloodbath for which he's known, and shows that Dave Cobb seems to be finally getting better at producing a solid bass groove. This is not pure outlaw violence so much as there's a real romantic core here. Call it cliche that our outlaw's got an unmailed letter for his girl promising that his stolen fortune would lead to their success and fortune, now caught by police who are gonna torture him to death for the location of that gold. But there's such a focus on grisly detail and storytelling that's so evocative and striking, it demands your attention. But again, that desperate emotive core rises to the forefront, and when so much of it is painted with this bloody reality, yeah, it's my favorite Ian Noe song in 2019. And that's high praise indeed.
The magic is black, backyard happy and fertile. For castle, the ass king of the black circle. Same year, Bubby dropped 2 horns, hatched and matured. To Gore, Northport's 84.
And on the topic of murder, we now have Aesop Rock, taking a very similar brand of overwritten but very human detail to discussing the Ricky Castle murder in the 80s. And again, that's where that humanistic framing slides to the forefront of Ace's fascination. Grubby kids in the 80s exploring underground music and Satanism with entirely too much drugs, if you know, you know, and him being smart enough to show both the relative banality of the situation, almost conversational, but also how it could have meant so much more, and was never fully explored or explained. And the production from Tobacco does a lot of heavy lifting here. The pulsating gurgles, the slightly off-kilter drums for the final hook, but a melodic swell for the final hook that seems rooted in the weirder side of 80s synth pop and accentuates and amplifies that vibe yanked straight from the satanic panic of the time. And as someone who has always lurked around the edges of that scene and has had something of a fascination, yeah, even despite the bloody twist, this just ruled.
I don't need the words, I want the sound, 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 sound. I don't need the words, I want the sound, 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 sound.
So, I went back and I checked. Carly Rae Jepsen has never made a year-end list of songs like this of mine before this. Which seems kinda nuts given that Run Away With Me has become a synth-pop classic of this decade, and deservingly so. But the sound is something else, man. The sleeper hit of Dedicated that I certainly didn't expect would grow on me the way it did. All about the gentle exasperation that comes with wanting someone to commit to a little more off the faded cascade of piano and the spare bassy touch around the beat. And when you pay attention to the melodic intricacy and impeccable cadence of her delivery, it's just so perfect, especially in the pre-chorus. It nails the balance between polish and organic emotion, especially by the time that bridge comes in with a moment that's so damn infectious in its own right. Yeah, Carly Rae knocked it out of the park this time. And well, it's not the first time a song called The Sound has made a year-end list of mine. For me, this is the better one.
Where's the catch? Where's the catch?
I'm still kind of perplexed how this works at all. Or I'm not even sure if it does, but it feels so damn magnetic and hypnotic to me all the same. Maybe it's the paranoia that has James Blake constantly questioning why things could have never quite clicked the way they should, or the muffled but jittery piano and tangles around the bass line before the padded drum line ominously stalks in as the mix begins to sputter and fracture apart. And then Andre 3000 shows up with a verse that seems just as dense and questioning, reflecting the curdled pessimism that warps the entire song. But what's so strange is how he basically comes in emphasizing all the heady work he did putting in to build the verse, and then proceeds to sound effortless, all in the service of frustration. That's the tricky thing with James Blake here, how even when he chops everything down to ribbons, there's just so much sustained tension, and the fact that he made the song so layered and so still compelling throughout all of it without paying any of it off? Yeah, that's a marvel, especially as I found myself asking that titular question and not really sure I need the answer.
It's all coming back to me. Wish I didn't fail to say those words before you had to leave.
Now this, on the other hand, is all glorious payoff because Avantasia makes epic-sounding power metal, and this is the best example they had all this year. And well, the easy way to summarize all of this would be to point at the bridge and say, yes, all of that, more of that, please. But between a solid guitar solo, a lot of well-balanced frolicking groove, a fantastic hook, and even lyrics accentuating how sometimes the larger world just is not ready for that higher vision, and it's not a bad thing you had it all the same. Maybe just a new path is required as you let it all the past go up in smoke. That still isn't a lure, but a new path is needed. But again, when you got a bridge that compositionally recalls the best of Jim Steinman, you're getting on this list. Damn near without question, cause this rules.
Over coffee, stirring in the cinnamon, while you read me poetry by dead men.
If there is a surprise entry to this list that sparks more bewilderment than outright anger, it's gonna be this. Because nobody really talked about that Sara Bareilles album this year, pretty much except for me, and yet this blew apart all of my expectations. I've long held the belief that her material works best when she can balance out righteous frustration with emotive pathos, which is one reason why Love Song and King of Anything are great, well-balanced pop tracks. The Poetry by Dead Men leans into her theatricality in its retrospective look at someone who just would not commit, and now she's got to move on for her own damn sake. But god damn it, she's going to accentuate what was left behind and all the grounded reality of her pain and frustration, paired with the glistening keys and the shuddering rushes of deeper strings off the deeper percussion that still pull off a pretty impressive crescendo in their own right. I'm on the cusp of saying this might be her best song, and it really deserved so much more attention.
You think you know me? What do you really? Something you do, something you say, we don't talk about me.
And on the topic of relationships fracturing because of failures to communicate, don't look at me like that, this year is messy. You think you know me, but do you really? We've got a cut from Of Monsters and Men that I'd argue is basically overlooked in comparison with a lot of the huge pop rock moments that define Fever Dream, like Alligator. And that's kind of a shame because there is a lot of poignancy and real beauty to a song like this, where our frontman is trying to convey the heavier angst and depression that's been lying beneath the surface for so long, where he might genuinely genuinely need her help, and the acknowledgement that his partner wants to help, but she's only getting pieces of the picture, which is frustrating when the magnetism between them is still as strong as it always been, but they just aren't connecting. And the pop focus works off the fluttery keys, the spikes of guitar, more propulsive drums, and a melodically developed hook that frankly hits as well as they have ever had. Of Monsters and Men, they were always a band that garnered a lot of their greatest firepower leaning into more melody, and despite this being one of their simplest, it's also one of their best. Or, you know, one that got to me at just the right time. Look, Frank Turner's No Man's Land is a flawed album in a lot of ways, which I described at length this year, but as a tribute to feminine liberation, and specifically Huda Sha'awari, who was responsible for galvanizing the feminist movement in the Arab world back in the early 1900s, the Lioness kicks ass, and Frank Turner delivered a wallop of a song with one of his most explosive and anthemic hooks in years. The roaring guitars, the brittle bass foundation that picks up a lot of energy as the song ratchets up its energy, and a solo that kicks in at precisely the right moment. It's arguably one of the closest things to a straightforward, just kick-ass anthem that Frank Turner has put out in years that actually works for me, and with that, yeah, you know what? I can feel the movement here.
I'm sure I'll find it. No one help me when my eyes go red. I'm sure I'll find it.
Man, apparently the second theme of this list is tonal whiplash, because here we've got one of Brockhampton's most bleak singles to date, and it might just be their best, or at least one that fully hit for me in a way that they've always only found piecemeal before. The lethargic but fractured guitar loops, the haunted hook from Dev Never, how every single verse carries its own distinctive angst, from Matt's abandonment post-breakup told with a lot of stark detail, the different veins of restraint in Merlin and Dom's depression, and then Joba and Bareface come in to hit the moments of mid-song breakdown that feel incredibly raw, even despite of, or maybe because of, a lot of the muted delivery. It's a song about searching for something, but knowing that when you inevitably succumb to your demons, you can't really be helped in the same way. And there's a rawness to that pain you can never quite escape. Again, for me, at least this year, might be Brockhampton's best song, at least to date.
Echoes of you, repeating from the beating of your telltale heart.
And on the topic of tracks in the throes of mid-collapse, here's the more bombastic, melodramatic side of it from Josh Ramsey, second-guessing all of his own instincts as he stumbles towards what could very well be madness in the face of the lost love he's been trying to escape for an album and a half now. And yes, it's not nearly as real as a song like No Halo, but Marianas Trench leans into the unreality of it all to ramp up the strings-accented bombast and the creeping dread to 11, and then just keep going, especially into the switch up for the final crescendo where Roger Joseph Manning Jr. serves as the little voice spurning Ramsey even deeper towards that yawning pit of emotions that he's buried but never completely processed, emblematic of how you don't quite bury that sort of past trauma in the same way. Coupled with probably being some of the best Edgar Allan Poe theme music since Nightwish a dozen years ago, and Marianas Trench have another tour de force under their belt.
Where you at? Where you at? If it ain't moving us, then it need to fall back. Plus much, plus heart, what you call that? Pinpoint aim, when I flame, you get all that. Where you at?
So this is my favorite rap song of 2019. Where Shredders laid the groundwork for their targets on Vanilla Isis, this is the larger broadside. Glassy clinks off the spare groove before the clanking bombast roars to the forefront for an incredible hook. It's a sort of banger production for which we always expect from the Doomtree crew, but then Sims and POS let off a battering ram of assertions that blow into some uncomfortable territory, and then they don't stop. Failures to capitalism, a machine that spat both them out as they refocus on the art that can't move the spirit, and the world falling apart, POS admitting frankly, if it hits them honestly, it wouldn't even be that mad. He's ready, and Sims is ready to follow, knowing just how bleak this road can go once they've got their people behind them. We got one of the most iconic lines of this year. It goes classes to ashes, this machine kills fascists. The song is framed as a war cry. It's got the teeth to back it up, framing the message once etched into Woody Guthrie's guitar, brings it into the modern age. Fucking hell, I was ready for it.
Once a white flower under cold stars on the grave of the forgotten dead.
Now, this was the Frank Turner song that really clicked for me this year, and yet it's one that's actually had the problem I had with this album, in that he's speaking from the female point of view without really a need to, especially given the relative anonymity of the scene of an unnamed prostitute who died in ancient times in the town that would become London, England. But there's two factors that work in this song's favor. The first being the consistent romanticism in its sweep and the undying love that has outlasted those corrupt priests and those who would have condemned or exploited that passion. The sort of legacy that lives across time. It's got a lot of power, especially when you pair it with that slow-burning crescendo that hits its apex on Christmas morning and winds up reminding me of similar climaxes of Love Iron Song, the best Frank Turner album. It's amazingly well-paced, the melodic change-ups earn that dramatic swell, and Frank Turner, he delivers in spades. It's one of his best songs in years, and if it wasn't for some issues of framing, this could have well been my song of the year. So what beat it?
I guess it doesn't matter anyway. I don't care about nothing but you. I guess it doesn't matter anyway.
And following our themes of high romanticism and rather dire times and circumstances, we got one of the best songs that Pup has ever released, where amidst the wallow of nihilism and aimless rage, where he has run himself ragged right to the edge, he meets the one person who's just as jaded and bitter about everything as he is, and it's an unbelievable rush. It's an exhaling moment. It reminds me of the powerful and very human catharsis that works in the best moments of You're the Worst, because it's pretty good to feel something. And Pup is gonna ramp the huge hooks up to 11 and then shove two of their best right after each other within the song. The guitars have huge pop-punk crunch, Stephen Babcock is howling his lungs out with a lot of snotty rage, and the melodies remain as sticky as ever, even as he cusses himself out for getting way too literal. But hey, that is what love will do for you. You're not gonna try for subtlety, and it really is that good to feel something, you know.
Don't say you're gonna save me, save me, save me. Don't say you're gonna save me, save me, save me.
I remember the first time I heard Shade of the Pines, and I remember thinking, this couldn't possibly be from some no-name band I discovered on Bandcamp, barely even known within their own country, let alone where I was at across the Atlantic. But if I'm talking about one of the best crescendos of the year, off the echoing acoustic fragments that would cycle and build off the propulsive swell with aching strings and yearning that questions its own existence because there's no way he can be saved, but the hope lingers anyway. It's a song that questions whether love is even possible and then lets himself believe just enough. Precisely placed vocal harmony, stunning falsetto, beautiful melodies that makes your soul want to soar. Again, very nearly my song of this year, and the fact it lasted this high on my list from nearly the beginning of 2019, a testament to its power. Because folks, Sundays are the real goddamn deal. You probably haven't heard of them. Get on board already. This is something special.
You're safe as a mountain, but know that I am dynamite.
But on the topic of Sundays, I already placed Avalanche on this list, but if I was looking for a song that got away from all the willowy yearning into something that's more raw and real while keeping the melodic focus and the themes of that song, yeah, Sigrid delivered with Dynamite. And what hurts about this song is that it's all about trying to balance the grand scope of your emotions and longing for another with the reality of work and art and passion, all against the bare bones piano, because god damn it if Sigrid's not going to try to make you feel all that pathos just herself with every step of the way, especially with the reality just at a frame that, at least right now, probably isn't going to work. There's a maturity to this drama that, frankly, for which Sigrid has not gotten enough credit, because, man alive, an imbalance of passions and a question of being able to do both when sometimes it's not going to work. Yeah, that's another one that picked up some unique resonance for me in 2019. But you know, with the talent that Sigrid brings to the table, it's really well deserved, all the same.
I was a high woman and a mother from my youth. For my children I did what I had to do.
The audacity of a song like this, It's kind of unmatched. Taking the original structure of the Highwaymen song and stripping out all the dated production for a greater sense of atmosphere and flipping the stories to be explicitly feminine and considerably heavier and loaded with social commentary by doing so, the Highwaymen carve out a legacy that's not just better than the classic they interpolated, but one that justifies the group purely with its existence. Seriously, even if this had been their only song, it would be enough. From Brandi Carlile centering the immigrant story, Amanda Shires highlighting the misunderstood, sexually open witch, Yola then stepping up to place the black women in the civil rights movement on their rightful pedestal, and then Natalie Hemby showing how even pure faith and altruism had led to her death, with the reincarnation narrative echoing all the more sharply because how far none of this is removed from now. A legacy oft untold, now reclaimed, and daring the challenge for those who can't bear to see the full scope of history behind them. In other words, unquestioned for me, the best country song of 2019. So what's better?
And yeah, I should have known better, but I swear it was better before.
Of all the songs on this list, this is the one I find hardest to talk about, because Jetty Bones made her version of Till It Happens to You with all the gaslighting and self-doubt of the dress, but painted into more visceral tones because now there's family and friends and social norms to which none of this makes sense, and she needs to find a way to reconcile real trauma, delivered with a pop-rock emo framing and sound that you could have heard 15 years ago on the radio, which when juxtaposed with the subject matter cuts all the deeper. There's no punches being pulled, there's no relief, just a sort of brutal reality that doesn't make sense with this delivery and sound, and yet it feels all the more real because of it. Definition of too real. And for me, it wasn't that far removed from Oliver Thorne's video Philosophy Tube on how men deal with abuse and trauma. Even being sung from a different perspective, you feel it. And in 2019, I needed this. Especially given how the arc of healing came forth from the EP proper. Really fucking heavy stuff, I gotta say. Or, you know, put it another way. If the last track was too real at the darkest point, this is the blazing sunlight that doesn't deny the darkness, but leans into a hyper-localized expression of a morning's hope and how to cope with it. Full of black humor and righteous fury that Pup made their own in 2019. I don't know if it's just the Toronto-specific reference points that are so unmistakably real, they click so deeply, or the boredom that drags your mind into dark places and makes you question everything when you drag yourself out on the other side, or how he looks at that other person and asks what the hell he can even do. They had everything. They pissed it away. And while there might be some flicker of affection left, there's certainly no words. And while he holds himself to account for as much as anything that has spiraled out of control, time makes idiots of everyone, especially as he's not sure where he's ultimately gonna land, when there's so many crashing hooks and huge sing-along moments that translate both on the record and live, making you even think that a festival stage makes you think they're just playing as Sneaky D's all over again. Folks, there's not a lot of music that can so thoroughly recapture its time and place regardless of setting while feeling resonant and transcendent anywhere. And for me, in this moment, this brighter moment, it's why Morbid Stuff by Pup is the best song of 2019. One more list less, folks. Let me see you on the other side. But until then, if you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. And hey, you want to see other videos? You want to potentially subscribe to my Patreon to help influence the schedule for what I'll hear next year? Or hey, you want to hear more of these songs? Links to the card right over there. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.